Hi, this is John Lack, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the Grueling Truth Network.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris with you here again, finally with the start of baseball season upon us. Pitchers and catchers have reported. Some players have reported to a secretive spring training that we will touch on here in just a few minutes. And the rest of Major League Baseball should be reporting here probably in the next couple of days. Tonight is NBA All-Star festivities night. It's Saturday with Chris and I doing the show. So plenty to get to. Goose Gossage is not making friends in the Big Apple. The Yankees really are just in the news a lot this week. Gossage is being a jerk. A drug kingpin may have pitched for them. I think really without any more kind of just hilarity, let's go ahead, put the ball in play, and we're going to start really quickly here because we don't want to get into too much. You've seen it plenty, but take a moment to extend, and I know the things have been said, but extend our deepest condolences to the family and the community of those affected by the shooting this week. Obviously, not too far south of me, a couple of hours south of me at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. For those of you who don't know, I didn't know this until I heard it. I don't think you knew, Chris, and we haven't had a chance to talk much this week with you getting back into baseball and starting conditioning and coaching, but that was Anthony Rizzo's alma mater as a high school player. And he has since left Cub spring training. He has gone back to the community. He will be there, I think, throughout the weekend for some services, and then he will report back to Arizona with the Cubs to begin. So, want to start off the show obviously a little somber, a horrific tragedy. We're not taking a side here. We're not making any political statements. But at the end, it's one of those things that just makes you, I know it makes you hold your daughter a little bit tighter and makes us all kind of just sit back and shake our head at the crap that this world is seeing. I wanted to use a bit more of an adult word, but we want to keep it still friendly for those little ears who hopefully enjoy listening to Out of Left Field. Moving into baseball, guys, let's talk about the aforementioned Hall of Famer, Rich Goose Gossage, the former relief pitcher who has made waves plenty of times the last couple of years. He is not one to shy away from letting his opinion be known about multiple things, everything from calling Jose Bautista an effing disgrace a couple of years ago to saying that he didn't want to be compared to Mariano Rivera because unlike Rivera, who was more of a one-inning pony, Gossage could pitch multiple innings. Well, this year, the New York Yankees made a decision that unlike they have in the past, and they still do with other players, they would not invite him to attend spring training this year. Now, guys like Reggie Jackson, some other players, usually every year have a chance to go kind of be special guest instructors, bring kind of that Yankees lore with them, and hopefully help guys in different areas. Obviously, Reggie, Alex Rodriguez, we discussed, might be doing that in some form this year. We'll see with his new deal. I believe he's with ESPN, helping out their Sunday Night Baseball crew in the absence of Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager now. But Gossage had some things to say, and we're going to give it to you as straight as we can, while still making sure it's friendly for all of the little ears. And asking basically why Gossage wasn't invited, he said in part, quote, "Well, with power, is that what happens to you? You turn into an effing a-hole? Is that it? I don't know." In reference to, as he went on to talk about how George Steinbrenner would be rolling in his grave, with the way that Cashman has run this team. He said, quote, of the late George Steinbrenner, "He would have been gone 10 years ago if George was still around. He'd have been gone when he jumped out of that effing airplane. Do you think he's a good effing baseball guy? Really? He doesn't believe in effing coaching." So, certainly not one to mince words, and there have been some other things that have gone on that were said to Brendan Cuddy of NJ.com, and we can discuss that here in a minute on top of those comments. But Chris, I don't really. I mean, he wants to kind of play the victim here. I wouldn't invite him to my spring training. I mean, what the hell? Why the hell do you think you're not invited to Tampa?
Well, I mean, I'm sick and tired of Goose Gossage, to be 100% honest with you. It just seems like every time Goose Gossage is in the news, it's because he's ripping some player or another, whether it's a baseball player or even a football player, Cam Newton in particular, or any athlete in general that wasn't, his generation. Somebody that didn't play in the 1970s and 1960s, 1970s. If you didn't break your knuckles in the 1970s as a closer, then Goose Gossage has no use for you. If you didn't play back in the NFL when hits were hard and nobody cared about safety, then Goose Gossage has no use for you. Well, I tell you what, Goose, nobody has any use for you anymore either. You're just a loudmouth, has been, kind of a washed-up style Hall of Famer who tries to stay relevant by ripping people in the media. And at this point, you don't know who you can blame the most. I mean, is it Goose Gossage for having opinions? Is it the media for giving him a platform? Whose problem is Goose Gossage at this point? Well, he's certainly not the Yankees' problem anymore. The Yankees have it looks like they've set ties with him at this point. Not inviting him to spring training is a big deal. And he had an opinion, of course, about Brian Cashman after not being invited to spring training.
And this
in which he
the
said,
article
quote,
that I was referencing with Brendan Cuddy of NJ.com.
In which she said,
it's
quote,
massively insulting.
I don't like Cashman.
Good Lord.
I don't like Cashman. That's all. It's not a secret. If he had any balls, he'd do what he wants to do. He doesn't think he needs any baseball people around. Maybe he's right. The way the game is being run today, maybe you don't. The game is so different today. Like I said, real baseball guys for years made a career out of baseball. You're not a coach anymore. You have to be their best friend.
Which sounds like kind of a shot across the bow at Aaron Boone. And I understand that, Joe Girardi won a World Series, had a decade-long,
is a third-generation major leaguer, so he's obviously a baseball guy.
Right, and I get that Girardi took him to a World Series. They won a ring with him. He lasted a decade in New York, which is very beyond the life expectancy of most managers, especially when you're dealing with the Yankees as a whole. But at the end of the day, players and the front office alike felt that a new voice was needed. Our buddy Adnan Virk says, he thinks Booney's going to be really, really good with that team. And it looks like Gossage is just shooting across the bow at the fact that, Boone isn't being an a-hole. He's going to be a good communicator who's going to be able to talk with these guys and kind of, placate some of maybe their frustrations as a lot of this young team turns into a lot of the big stars that we expect them to be.
Right. And I read a really great article about this whole situation by Craig Calcaterra at NBC Sports. And he really is, as a member of the media, as a baseball analyst, as a baseball reporter, he's basically done with Gossage at this point. In fact, in part of the article, he talks about that this might be, the reporter's fault for him easy headlines. But he says at the end of his article, and I love this because he says, I would hope, though, that this is the last time reporters call on Gossage absent any news that relates specifically to him, because the whole, hey, Goose, why don't you rant about the younger generation stuff is tired and played out at this point. And I cannot agree with Mr. Calcaterra more on that subject. I think that listening to Goose Gossage rip people who didn't grow up at the same time he did is basically just overdone, and I'm sort of over it.
Well, and the sad thing is, if the California police could have been a little bit, less nosy, Gossage might have been able to go ahead and talk with another Pinstripe alumnus and maybe get into another side, of business that apparently former Yankees like to do. And that's obviously journeyman Esteban Loaiza, the former pitcher and starter for the American League in the 2003 All-Star Game, getting arrested in San Diego with basically about 44 pounds of cocaine and or heroin.
Oh, cool.
Not a big headline. Nothing really big, nothing to talk about here, nothing to see. Pay no attention to that man behind the steering wheel. But Esteban Loaiza now is looking, of course, pleased not guilty, but is looking about 20-plus years in prison for transporting and intent to sell of a heavy amount of the illegal stuff. Well,
when you got 44 pounds of coke stuffed into a false compartment, and the police go ahead and find that, I'm just going to be John Madden for a minute. When you got a bunch of coke stuffed into a false compartment and the police find it, it's going to get you sent to prison.
I mean, let's be honest. Transporting that amount of drugs in a false compartment in a vehicle through California, it was a bold move, Flurry. It's a bold move, Battle.
Yeah, no. And I think we see how it worked out. Not well.
A guy who you could say maybe is a product a little bit of the Needle era, had was a career journeyman, never really had a season until all of a sudden 2003 when he went, I think, 21-9. It's a two-time All-Star, the second winningest Mexican pitcher behind Fernando Valenzuela in MLB history. We'll talk about another Mexican pitcher in Jaime Garcia here in just a few minutes. But, yeah, I heard this. Actually, to tell you about it, I saw the headline, and it was former Yankee pitcher arrested as drug kingpin. And granted, now see, I know my dad is sitting there just laughing his butt off because Loaiza barely played for the Yankees. But the first who gets, the Yankees pitcher. Man, that fool played for the Yankees for maybe 1 or 2 years, if that, for 1 or 2 years out of the majority of his career. But we're going to lump it all in on the Pinstripes because everyone loves to hate the New York Yankees. And I'm sitting here looking at this. I'm like, well, man, who is this guy? Then I realized, I'm like, man, he wasn't fair. He pitched for the Yankees one time, and you're going to say, come on now.
To be fair, hating on the New York Yankees is an honorable and traditional pastime. And I think that anyone who chooses to dedicate their life to hating the Yankees has chosen a noble profession.
Dude, my dad already told you you're part of the family. I swear you're already his favorite son. Shut up. You don't have to ingratiate yourself anymore. You're probably already in the damn will. Just knock it off, man. The heck, bro? That's all I'm saying.
Well, what's interesting to me is that despite the fact that Loaiza won't be invited to any spring training facilities this year.
I just want to – the All-Star year, that 21-9 record, he played for the freaking White Sox. His best career year. He played with the White Sox, and we're going to say he's a Yankees pitcher. I mean, come on, man. That's all. That's all. I mean, it's just one of the, okay, yeah, I get it, but come on. It's just, I get we're having some fun. I mean, obviously the guy, he's going through, he's pleaded not guilty. We'll see how it plays out in the court of law. But, on top of that, they think that the house where the stuff was stored was less than 1,000 feet from an elementary school, which there are so many things here that kind of exacerbate beyond just the weight of drugs that he had. Man, this guy, it's not looking too good for him right now.
Yeah, no, it's not good at all. What else? Other things going on in the league, I think, are really not good as well. And one of those things is, you and I talked about last week about at what point do we have to step back and say, is the Major League Baseball Players Association helping or hurting the players of this game, both in the way that they're treating the Owners Association and the way they're treating Major League Baseball as a whole. I get that it's the job of the MLBPA to fight for players' rights, but at some point, you've got to think that there is a right way and a wrong way to go about doing that. And in my opinion, what's going on right now in Major League Baseball, the MLBPA is doing it in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is they have started a private training camp, spring training, if you will, camp for unsigned free agents. It's already begun. And not only are they putting these guys through their paces in a spring training sort of camp, but they're not letting anybody come see them. They've kicked a Royals scout out already. And in my opinion, if what you're doing is to get these guys signed and not simply to make some sort of political statement about the way baseball is, then you're not doing them any favors by not letting the scouts come in and watch them play. Because these guys aren't going to get signed based on what they've done in the previous years. Because if they were, they'd be signed already. So in my opinion, I think that this is really a terrible idea that you can lay directly at the feet of Major League Baseball's Player Association Director, Tony Clark.
I'm not so sure how much is Tony Clark's thing. I mean, Bo Porter, former manager for the Astros, I believe he was a third base coach or first base coach for the Braves last year, is running it. But, I mean, you talk about it's not just not letting people in. They are cut off for the most part. You can't, they've pretty much made it clear that no one gets in. The players are housed on site. They don't need to drive in. I mean, the gate it's guarded. It's fenced in. A veteran reporter, Joey Johnston, was sent out there to try and get in, and the guard told him, just when he asked if he can wait around the perimeter, the guard told him, quote, "We were vehemently told there would be no public access. No one gets in there. No one," close quote. I mean, which is
in direct contrast to what Tony Clark said when this whole thing started, saying, quote, "Our goal here is to provide a training facility that guys can use if they want to stay sharp and or work into baseball shape in the event that they get a call from an interested team and want to be able to hit the ground running once they arrive. It is a controlled environment that is much the same as many players already have in place in their home cities. As such," and here's where it's in contrast, "it provides the same opportunities to be seen and be worked out if the agent and player are interested in doing so." But we've already got reports that no one, quote unquote, is getting in there, right? So how is it providing these players any opportunity to be seen in the same way they could be seen if they were training at home? I disagree with Tony Clark's statements, and I disagree with this entire Dog and Pony show.
And supposedly a private workout can be set up with individual players. But this is one of those things that, hey, if to me, if the PA sees the landscape of free agency changing, which we alluded to, not really alluded to, we pretty much flat out said we think it's happening here, and it's an attempt to, I think, change the way things are going to be over the next couple of years, with some massive names going to hit the market. And like we said, at the end of the day, there's a ceiling here, folks. Baseball, you're not going to be able to keep selling a team for $2 billion and $3 billion. Like, it's not going to happen. Eventually, you're going to lose money. So I think that you're beginning to see the economics playing into this. So if the MLBPA feels that this is how it's going to start being, it's going to be this difficult to get guys signed because you have one group of people taking a hard stance on this change, and you have the group that is being directly monetarily affected by this change not willing to give into it, then why don't you go ahead and make this basically a 31st spring training camp? It can become a yearly thing where, Bo Porter or certain individuals run it, retired players, whatever it may be, and leave it open where guys can come in. At the end of the day, I told you at the end that maybe it's the idea that, well, you're going to see, you can look back at the tape and see what he did last year, make your decision from there. That's great. But you know what? If I had a bad year and I want guys to see that, you know what, I've worked my tail off, I'm trying to get back, I want to be seen. So, you can say it's on the onus of the player to make sure he gets out there and gets seen. But for guys that want to say, hey, I know I haven't gotten picked up yet, but I'm working my butt off to stay in baseball shape and get ready. I want to play for your team. Give me that chance. Let me sign that contract. Let's go to work. And it's easier to transition. Now, reports that it's being run a lot more rigorous and aggressive than a normal spring training. But again, there's so much talk that you don't really know what's going on. So then, as a scout or a GM, now do I know if I'm actually getting a player who's really in baseball shape? I don't know what you've been doing in there. So
right, exactly.
That's a tip at a really odd way.
And like it or not, there are some huge names still on the free agent market, the Eric Hosmers and the Jake Arrietas and the JD Martinezes. And in my opinion, I think pulling these guys into an enclosed environment and not letting anybody get in there and just watch them play or get anybody in there to just see if they've improved their abilities or worked, like you said, over the course of the offseason to get better is really hurting these guys more than it's helping them. And if that's the case for guys like Hosmer and Arrieta and Martinez, then you have to think that that's the case for guys like, the guys who aren't household names, the guys who we don't have, nobody knows that they're unsigned free agents because nobody really cares, right? The guys that are coming out of minor league deals and stuff, just getting off their rookie contracts and maybe looking in free agency, even just to get a minor league deal. Well, if you're locking these guys behind bars and not letting anybody see them, you're hurting them. There's no doubt about that. And like you said, at some point, you're going to reach a zenith where teams can't make any more money and they can't sell these teams for more and more money because the income to debt ratio is not going to support it. They're going to start losing money. And that's absolutely true because I'll tell you one thing, people are not ever going to pay football ticket prices to watch baseball. It just isn't going to happen. No one is ever going to pay $150 or $180 for a nosebleed seat at a baseball game.
And the thing that needs to happen, similar to football, is what the Falcons have done. Falcons had a game where it's like a throwback type game, and they lowered their concession prices for a game, and ended up actually making more money with lower concession prices than they did with the exorbitant prices you see now. And they've lowered their prices across the board. It's about as stupid to me, and I'm kind of ranting at this point, that with the economy the way that it still kind of is, it's not perfect, that Disney has the audacity to raise their prices again, and their numbers, if I remember correctly, were down. It's just, come on, just stop it. Right. Guys, as always, Out of Left Field is being brought to you by the Grueling Truth Network. Be sure to check out thegruelingtruth.net, everything for your upcoming NFL draft. Of course, March Madness right around the corner. Guys are always putting out the new power rankings. You'll see who's going to be in the big dance. Boxing shows up every week if you're a big boxing fan. A ton of good stuff there. Be sure to check out all the good articles and the podcasts. You can go to the Grueling Truth app on both iPhone and your Android device, thegruelingtruth.net, at Grueling Truth on Twitter. Also, we are on iHeartRadio. Be sure to check out the show at OO Left Field on Twitter and Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. With the season right around the corner, be sure to give a like to the Out of Left Field baseball community page and get ready to have a lot of fun as we see what each team is going to do to start out the year. Maybe your team still has that opening to sign that big free agent. You want to know who it's going to be? Be sure to stay with Out of Left Field for all of that information as we get ready within the next about a month and a half for real opening day baseball in April. Moving on to an area that makes Chris very happy. I saw it, knew he was going to be excited. I'm not overly thrilled by it because it doesn't affect me in any specific way, but something that we have talked about plenty of times, and I think it is high time coming. the San Francisco Giants have announced that current president of baseball operations and, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, former general manager, Brian
Executive
Sabian,
Executive Vice President of baseball operations, former general manager.
And he was the former GM, correct?
Right.
Okay.
For a
Brian
long time
Sabian,
GM.
Yeah, will now take a, quote, more involved role with the Giants in 2018. This comes on the heels of, let's be honest, two really, really unimpressive seasons by the Giants. 2 times we expected them to be really a strong team. They were a strong team 2 years ago through the first half of the year. It had one of, and I know much to your chagrin, I'm sure it still hurts as a fan, but one of the most epic collapses that we have seen from a ball club in recent history. Probably as close to, I would say, what the Braves did at the end of 2011 when they had a chance to make it in. We saw how many different teams chances to make it into the postseason, and the Red Sox got bounced, the Braves got bounced on game 162. Of course, that's when Evan Longoria had his big rope home run into left field right across the short wall to send the Rays into the playoffs. So this is going to be good for them. Current GM Bobby Evans, granted, he was the general manager by title during the 2014 World Series, or at the beginning of 2015. But really, when you look at this, those 3 World Series were Sabian's. He was the architect behind it. He had Bruce Bochy's ear. There was obviously a respect there. There was something that worked. You win your World Series, you kind of retool because guys are going to want more money. You get yourself set up through 1 year, you win it the next year, and it was it was almost an expectation. And we talked about it, kind of the even year expectation for the Giants. This is a huge move. I like that they're doing it. Evans will still stay as the GM, but Sabian will have a bigger hand and thumbprint on things. This is a quote from Brian Sabian, quote, "I'll pay respect to how Evans has operated the last 3 years, that my experience has been called upon, and ownership and CEO Larry Baer want this as an initiative starting with me, and we're going to carry it out as best we can on an everyday basis," end quote. Chris, I know that you didn't really know this was happening. I mentioned it, and you're thinking, okay, well, what's the big role? You've had a couple hours since we've been kind of talking and prepping to marinate on this. As a fan, I know your reaction, but as an analyst, sitting back, knowing what this team has pitching-wise, and we know that the holes have been more in the bullpen, what they've added in Longoria and McCutchen, guys like that, to you as someone who has watched this team very closely, has written about this team within the last 4 to 6 years, heavily for the Bay Area, some Bay Area news outlets. What does this mean to you to have Sabian not taking over as the official GM, but having a very heavy role again on that side of operations for this ball club?
Well, my first reaction is this. First of all, look for Bobby Evans to be going away here pretty soon. I realize that the Giants have said that this isn't a demotion of Bobby Evans, that this isn't nothing against, not a pure reflection on Bobby Evans so much as it is that everyone in the organization is upset at a 98-loss season following a really difficult and upsetting 2016, which, like you said, was probably one of the most epic collapses we've ever seen, at least in recent history. And this isn't something that a team that's won, 3 championships in 7 years or 8 years is going to really let stand. And Sabian was the architect of those championship teams, and there's no question about that. You're not mincing words by saying that. But look for Bobby Evans to go away. I don't know that that Sabian's going to take over as quote unquote general manager, or so much as it is that the Giants are just going to make the VP of baseball operations the day-to-day guy. What's going to be interesting to me is with Sabian coming back, he's obviously going to start making moves immediately. Look for the Giants to start making moves, even if it's minor league stuff. Keep an eye on what the Giants are doing over the next couple of weeks as far as who they move around, where they put them. Definitely in the bullpen. It's already been sort of stated that the Giants aren't going to rule offering Tim Lincecum a contract out based on the showing that he had the other day in his workout where he was hitting 93, 94 miles an hour pretty regularly. That's where they would like to see a guy like Tim Lincecum at this point, and Brian Sabian loves him. So don't expect that to not be a move that Sabian makes because that's a Sabian move, and Sabian makes these weird sort of deals that no one thinks are going to work out, but then you have 3 championship teams in a 5-year span. But what I'm interested to see is how much leash, how do I want to put that? How much slack is Sabian going to continue to give to Bruce Bochy? Bruce Bochy.
Really?
Yeah. Bruce Bochy, whether it's public knowledge or not, Bruce Bochy's definitely in a hot seat at this point. After a 98-loss season, I get that he didn't have the strongest rotation or the strongest bullpen, but he still had a pretty decent opportunity to win more games than they won last year. After losing 98 games following a season where, they had that epic collapse, but remember they had that epic collapse and still made the playoffs based on the strength of what they did the first half of the season, and where they were the best team in baseball going into the break. And the majority of those guys came back, and Bochy couldn't manage to win 500. So whether it's in the news or not, Bochy is definitely sitting on a warm seat at this point. And I think that if Bruce Bochy is managing a below 500 team in June, then he will probably be gone for health reasons, and we'll see either Tim Flannery or Hensley Mullins step into the role as the everyday manager of the San Francisco Giants.
That is definitely not where I expected you to go. I'm surprised with that, and I think on the flip side of this, if we see that this works very, very well, then it is kind of damning for Bobby Evans, because obviously the chemistry that he and Bochy needed to have wasn't there. And now with Bochy being able to have Brian Sabian back in a more hands-on control approach with this ball club, I think certainly can put Bobby Evans' job in jeopardy long-term if we see this turnaround. I guess the hard part here is that, you think of this guy, of Boch being with this club so long, and he's won three titles. Then again, we've seen Mike Scioscia with the team even longer. I think he's the longest tenured manager currently in the big leagues with the same team. And he's been on the hot seat for multiple years, and they haven't really been competitive. This is a ball club who has expected to always be competitive really since the late, 2000s into the 20 teens. So, yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say it, but I think sitting back, it certainly makes a lot of sense.
But I'll say this. The Giants will never come out and fire Bruce Bochy. That's not how it will happen with Bruce Bochy. Bruce Bochy is too well-respected a manager to ever get fired.
Be a mutual decision.
Or like I said, he'll have another health issue, which issues have been a problem last year and the year before. He was down. He had that heart surgery. it'll be a mutual decision behind the scenes, but it'll come out as a decision for health reasons.
I think for me, what I'm interested to see, because this team has constantly kind of been there, but we kind of have, and I hate to say this in a way, I know you're not going to like to hear this, but we've kind of seen how this blueprint eventually plays out with the Cardinals. The Cardinals were the Giants pretty much from kind of the late 90s, early 2000s up until the 20-teens, even into the early teens, and we've kind of seen the Giants take over in a very similar way. And we've seen what can happen even after you had a guy like Tony La Russa move on and Mike Matheny come in. They still were able to win a title, I believe. I don't think Matheny won a title. I think La Russa won the last one, and they made it to the World Series. But we've seen how this can happen. The question is going to be, for me, will the Giants have the intestinal fortitude and the strength of wallet to go over the luxury tax threshold, if necessary, to make yourself competitive into and deep into the postseason? In a division like the NL West, where we don't know what's going to happen with the Diamondbacks, the Rockies are still a young team. I still think it's a crapshoot on how well Colorado is this year, but we know how good they are, how well they're going to play. We know how the Dodgers are going to do. I think that you need to see what you have currently with the pieces that you have now. Obviously, you traded Christian Arroyo, a young, hopefully up-and-coming superstar. We saw struggles last year in his rookie season in the bigs. You traded him for a 30-year-old Evan Longoria, and obviously an early to mid-30s Andrew McCutchen. So you're getting veteran presence that's very, very solid, but you're also kind of giving away some of your younger prospects in order to still have that win-right-now mentality. Sabian, we know, has been great at being able to manage that. I think that's what we're going to see now. And if the string has to get pulled on a rebuild because they just can't compete, that also might be a good time to see Bochy move on as, hey, we feel that we've kind of extended beyond what our real competitive time is right now, and it's time to kind of rethink things in baseball. And do you really want to be here for that? And Boch might say, I know you want to go in a new direction, and he can step away gracefully. I hope it doesn't happen. Right. It will eventually, but hopefully we have.
And I think it's very telling.
Of the Giants.
It's an apt comparison. I think it's very telling that that Tony La Russa won his last World Series with the Cardinals. The last time they won it, obviously, and that he retired from the Cardinals shortly thereafter. Everything seemed to be sunshine and rainbows. But Tony La Russa is in the front office staff of the Arizona Diamondbacks and not the St. Louis Cardinals. I think that's very, very telling because, everything seemed to be, very good between him and the Cardinals organization. But it almost seemed like, once he left the Cardinals as their manager, he couldn't get far enough away from them. But
he's also a West Coast guy. I mean, he's with the A's for a long time. So I think he's more of a West Coast guy. Most of us remember him with the Cardinals because he came over so early in the 90s that the young generation now doesn't remember him with the A's and the Bash Brothers and that kind of stuff.
Well, see, I remember him with the A's. The A's is where I grew up. I grew up with Tony La Russa as the manager of the A's.
Well, no, I know that, but you're not – Battle, we're not the younger generation anymore. I hate to say it, but
easy there, Chief. Easy.
You're mid-30s. I'm 31. All right. I'm just being straight with you. All right. Moving on.
Well, okay. So
go ahead.
I was going to say that the Toronto Blue Jays general manager is making some moves anyway, having signed Jaime Garcia to a $10 million one-year contract, which is probably not what Jaime Garcia was expecting to get, though. In my opinion, I think that's probably the high end of Jaime Garcia's value at this point. But another big name gets snatched up from free agency. Not as big a name as he was a couple of years back, but still a pretty big name. He's a veteran, 31-year-old guy, right? He started 18 games only for Atlanta last year. Got traded to Minnesota
He played for 3 teams last year.
Yeah, got traded to the Yankees. He made one start for Minnesota, then got traded to the Yankees. Became their number 5 guy. Did actually pretty well with them. If 0-3 with a 4.82 ERA and 8 starts is pretty well.
I'm going to go ahead and put this in perspective. He's a perfect Twinkie at 1-0, and an 0 for Yankee. He's 0-3.
Yeah. He just he had a rough season last season. I think that while he was still a Brave, and I think we talked about him last year, while he was still a Brave, we expected him to do better than 4-7 in 18 starts with a 4.3 ERA. I think we expected a little bit more out of him, not much more, but at least a winning record out of Jaime Garcia as a Brave, and that just didn't pan out for him. I think it was just a bad year.
A bad year, yeah, but the sad thing is when you go down through his numbers, granted, okay, he played in 10 games in 2008. That was his rookie year. Went 1-1. Okay, but aside from that, when he made it back in 2010, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got
he throws
5
his rookie year
seasons here. You got 5 winning seasons here, but he's only got 3 winning seasons where he won more than 10 games or won 10 games or more. He went 10-6 in 2015, 13-8 in 2010, 13-7 in 2011. He's also a guy who rarely can make more than 25 starts. Early in his career he had 28, he had 32. He made 30 starts in 2016. Last year at 27, but we've seen him oft injured for the Cardinals. He kind of made his debut in, I think it was 2012, where they were going up against 2011 when they won the World Series against the Rangers. That was kind of the Jaime Garcia and the Michael Walker come out party, and then it kind of just he seemed to keep getting injured. Things didn't work, and that's where we kind of began to see this kind of slow, precipitous drop because all these big arms that we thought were going to carry the Cardinals into that next stage of their development in Walker and Garcia never really developed into anything big. I mean, the Jays needed to sign somebody. You have Marcus Stroman, but Aaron Sanchez, you have Estrada, you have J Happ, but they needed a guy to fill it out. He's a veteran guy. He's 31 years old, been in the big leagues, right at 9, just over 9 years of big league time. So, I mean, it's not a move that makes you go, oh, the Jays are ready, but it's okay.
One of the things that really is bad about the earlier part of his career, you were talking about, he pitched in 2008 and then he comes back in 2010. For our listeners who don't know, he didn't come up in 2008 and then go back down. He came up in 2008, pitched 16 innings, and had Tommy John surgery. I mean, he was out the 2009 season with Tommy John. He came back from that in 2010 as a starting pitcher. Was not a starter when he came up in 2008. He only started 1 game, pitched in 10. He was a relief pitcher, but that's rough. You come up like that as a young kid at 21, you pitch 16 innings, you go down to Tommy John. That's hard at the beginning of anyone's season, and I think it took a toll on his entire career, to be honest, because, like you said, he's never had a season where he's had over 13 wins. He's got 67 career wins in 9 years in the big leagues, 55 losses in 185 games, 174 starts. You got to think that, when you have 50 or 60 no decisions as a pitcher, something is off, right? And it's got to start back there at that 2009 season being missed due to Tommy John. So I think that it's a good move. It's a good move for the Blue Jays because they do need a veteran presence. They do need a guy in the bullpen or a guy in the clubhouse who can be a veteran presence. But don't expect to see this guy come out and win 15 or 20 games. It's not happening.
No, I mean 13, like I said, was his best clip, and that was in 2010, 2011. The thing here that you see, he's just over 1,050 and 1,053 innings pitched throughout his career. His highest number was in 2011, 194 and 2/3. And then obviously from there, we've seen it up and down. Still managed to get up above 150 last year, above 170 the year before. Part of his contract is going to be innings pitched. He gets $500,000 upon reaching 150, 160, 170, and 180 innings throughout the year. So if he can stay healthy, we get the longevity, he can make some decent starts and get deep into the ball games, he's going to be able to get an extra $2 million on top of that contract. So, I would expect him to sit probably more around a 3 or maybe even the 4 spot, likely the 4 spot. 5 even maybe, but I would think him more as kind of the 4 guy, maybe behind Happ. That's going to be really kind of a play thing. But when you look at some of the sabermetrics, just on a positive note, in the last 2 years, he's gone 328 and 2/3 inning, which is almost the same number he's had the last 4 years. So, like we said, he's able to finally get a higher number of innings together the way your standard starter should, and he's getting ground balls on over 55% of the balls put in play. So a guy who generates contact, but a lot of it's weak on the ground contact, and his swinging strike rate was 11.1% last year. Again, a lot of sabermetric stuff. We're used to numbers, but at least there is some positive, that we've seen from him. Maybe it all comes together. Maybe a new team north of the border helps him out. Speaking of free agent pitchers, the New York Mets have made a signing, a guy who we both thought had a good chance of starting the All-Star game last year. I believe ended up still making it into the All-Star game, his first and only appearance in the All-Star game thus far, was Jason Vargas, a guy who won 18 games, a career high, lost 11, and really after the All-Star game, the wheels just came off. As we began to go over this, Chris, I know we talked really beyond the end of July. If he made it through the 6th inning, he was lucky. We were seeing a lot of 2 innings, 4 innings, maybe into the 5th. He was getting knocked around the yard. He did not look good. Had one of his highest inning totals last year at 179 and 2/3. That is his 4th highest total in his career, a 12-year veteran. In 12 years, 85 and 81. So he is an above 500 pitcher, but a career ERA right now of 4.17. Nothing really that impressive. But the Mets felt that, okay, we saw some promise last year, which they did. Of course, the Mets got with a new team manager, which they got. That's Mickey Callaway, was the pitching coach for the Indians. I mean, I think it's kind of safe to say that Mickey Callaway had some decent arms to coach when he was in Cleveland and didn't do too shabby of a job. So maybe this is just what Jason Vargas needed, a chance to work with the rotation that really should be good. And I think you and I are holding out hope that we really get to see these guys become what they should be. I mean, we've gone through a big 3 in Atlanta back in the 90s with Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz, where I grew up with. Of course, the A's. I know not your team. You didn't follow them quite as closely, but you had the big 3 and Hudson, Zito, and Mulder back in the early 2000s. And this was really supposed to be that 20-team type of big 3 with the Dark Knight, Thor, and DeGrom. And as we've discussed ad nauseum, injuries have plagued this team and have just made what should have been a dominating pitching staff been all but pedestrian over the last couple of years. So I like this.
My only
similar
question,
Yeah.
My only question about this move really is, where does he fit into this rotation, right? I mean, you're talking about obviously DeGrom, Syndergaard, Harvey, Matz. So does he take the Zach Wheeler position? Is Seth Lugo going to be a better pitcher this year? Is Gesselman going to be a better pitcher this year? You have 7 or 8 guys who are starting pitchers who are fighting for a position in this 5-man rotation. Where does Jason Vargas stand at this point? Is he going to make this rotation, this starting 5?
Well, I think that's the idea, and I'll tell you what, I'm actually kind of oddly, I don't want to say concerned, but I'm kind of curious because, Sandy Alderson has done some weird crap, right? I mean, he is not scared of doing things a little bit kind of off the normal path. Could we actually see a 6-man rotation out of the Mets to keep these guys, working? Maybe they can go deeper and they get an extra day. I mean, it's weird. Right. We've heard guys say maybe that'll be better for them. Could we actually see with this Vargas signing that be the answer they try to start the season out with?
I was just going to say, it makes sense when you have guys like Syndergaard and Harvey who have become injury prone, and had the blister thing and the shoulder, what was it, separation, the tear, and then Harvey with the blister issue. Maybe putting these guys every 6 days is the answer that the Mets are looking for.
And if you're Sandy Alderson, are you hoping for a good year out of Matt Harvey with enough rest so you can go ahead and get his butt out of New York? Are you hoping that he finally he shows out and I can finally get him to move on, and then maybe you go back to it? It's different. I mean, it's a decent contract. It's a 2-year deal. Basically, he gets an 8-year option at the end of it, and similar to Garcia, he gets $250K for reaching 160, 170, 180, 190, 200, and 210 innings in each season. So I mean, they are looking for him to be a workhorse, which that really surprises me. As he has, I mean, he's gone over 210 innings once in his career. That was at 29 years old in Seattle. He went 14-11. He made the year prior at 28. He made it to 201. I mean, the closest he has been to 200 was in 2014 at 187. Then we saw him at 43, and that's when I think he was more of a relief guy. But I mean, it's like you're putting some numbers out there that don't make a damn lick of sense for somebody who's 35 years old and has shown a history of the wheels coming off and not being able to get past the double century mark. That's just kind of like, well, there's the money, but you ain't going to get it.
Yeah. Man. Well, and in a 6-man rotation, he can't hope to hit those kind of numbers. So, right. But this all sort of bleeds in to the overarching idea of what the NL East is going to be this year. And I think that's probably where we should close, right? Is we should go ahead and start breaking down our divisions team by team. And if we're going to do that, why not start here?
We've been teasing it long enough. I mean, I get the teams don't answer to us, but I mean, we've been talking it long enough. Yeah, they're kind of forcing our hand. So, mind you guys, a lot of these breakdowns are going to change over time depending on the signing. Of course, all those signings, all the good stuff can be found at thegruelingtruth.net and the Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham Facebook page. We put a lot more information related to the show in baseball than the Grueling Truth will, just because there's so much stuff. They really get out there. They'll promote the articles. They'll always put out the show for us. But any individual stuff that you want to talk about, just shoot us an email, ooleftfield@gmail.com. You can also message us on Facebook. We respond as quickly as possible, usually within a couple of minutes. If I'm either at work, if Chris has a moment, he'll respond to you. We'd love to have the interaction with you. Of course, you can also tweet us at Graham_OOLF and at Chris_OOLF. So easy ways to get a hold of us here. For the most part, man, the NL East isn't that hard, okay? As we broke down, it's to us still the weakest division. You had one team above 500 last year, That was the Nationals, who were 3 games away from hitting the century, 97-65. The Marlins finishing second at 77-85. That ain't going to happen again this year. I said last week I'll be surprised if they can get 50 wins with what they're putting out there. It's sad, but I think it's a pretty accurate way to view what this team might be. The Braves came in third at 72-90. There's questions there. The Mets, 2 games back at 70-92. And the Phillies, who I thought were going to be one of the more improved teams last year and sit near the 500 mark, greatly disappointed me at 66-96. So we'll go ahead and start basically from the bottom. And the Phillies made a couple of decent moves. The big thing, number one, is that Pat Neshek, really, I think you could say easily one of the top relievers last year, re-signed with Philly. He was happy. Got a 2-year, $16.25 million deal. And he came out in the media and said, no, I could have made money elsewhere. He said, quote, "We didn't really wait for other teams. I probably left a little bit more on the table from other teams. Well, I know I did because a team called me after I agreed. Their first offer was better, but it was a comfort thing. I was really happy with the offer. I didn't want to wait and see anything else." End quote. You think about, Pat Neshek was only with the Phillies for a couple of months last year before they traded into the Rockies. So for a guy that has been around, he's 37 years old, been around for a minute, and then you're telling me that, hey, he was that happy with what that team had to offer, as bad as they were. They might not be great this year. I know we laughed and said, hey, any magic you might have is gone because of the Eagles' victory. But if that's the kind of culture that's happening in that locker room, and now you have a young guy in Gabe Kapler coming into management. I know we make our jokes, but Kapler's not too far removed from his playing days. This puts you in a good spot. And the Phillies still remain interested in adding to their rotation, not looking to make very lengthy commitments. It's according to Todd Zalecki of MLB.com. But basically, the general manager, Matt Klentak, and president Andy McPhail has said that they're not looking to splurge long-term, but that maybe adding somebody for a shorter deal, maybe a little bit of a higher value, is, quote, something we talk about frequently, end quote. So they are definitely willing to make some moves, but I think that the vision that this front office has is good. They're not going to overspend now just for the sake of overspending. Leave themselves open to when the pieces they need are going to be available once they're ready to be competitive. And when you have a guy like Neshek willing to re-sign, for just over $8 million a year, I think that says something about at least where the Phillies organization is hopefully heading coming down the pipe.
Yeah, I think that's a huge indicator of the quality of the locker room in Philadelphia, which we all know does play a huge role in how teams do. You can't do well as a team if there's a cancerous culture in the locker room, because guys are going to start playing for themselves. And anytime you have guys playing for themselves, team mentality goes right out the window. Baseball's a 9-man sport. That's just how the game works. My opinion, Philly doesn't end up on the bottom this year. I think they have that to look forward to, but only because the Marlins are going to be so
that was
horrible.
You're going out on one hell of a limb there, Chris.
The limb is coming up. I have 2 limbs. One of them is thin. I think the Braves take third place. They've made some moves, but not anything that I would call drastic enough to get them out of that middle spot, realistically. I'm going to stick the Mets over them. I think Noah Syndergaard comes back this year and is hungry. I think Matt Harvey's a little bit just wants to have a good showing so he can get the heck out of New York just as much as New York wants to get him the heck out of there. I think Jason DeGrom comes back and he's hungry. I think that there's going to be a great battle for the 4 and 5 slots in that rotation, and competition can do nothing but breed success. So I think the Mets come in second place in that division, but it's not even close. I don't even think the Mets are going to get over 500, to be honest with you. At or below 500 for the Mets. Washington Nationals are obviously going to walk away.
I'm tracking, you're going top to bottom. Marlins, Phillies, Braves, Mets, Nats, 5-1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The Nats are going to walk away with that division. It's not even going to be close. But here's the thin line.
Adam Eaton's healthy. Finally, you get a chance to really see what he can do and what they really paid for last year.
Well, and let's not forget what their bullpen looks like with Ryan Madsen and Sean Doolittle and Brandon Kinsler. I mean, it's going to be a shellacking in the East by the Nationals.
Think we had Michael Taylor's coming out party in the postseason. He was hitting the cover off the ball. Harper's in his final contract year. You know he's looking for that big deal. Zim's coming off a fantastic MVP season year. Murphy the same way. I mean, it's
Murphy, Gonzalez, and Harper are all in their contract years.
Right. To me, the question for the Nationals, can they make the deal for Real Muto from the Marlins? He wants out of Miami, and Wieters has just been nothing like what he was in Baltimore. To me, it shows just how smart Baltimore was to not spend that much money on him. Granted, they spent it on Trumbo. We'll see if that turns itself around. Wieters is the biggest question mark on that field for the Nationals. But yes, in that division, they will handily walk away with the division title and still have the possibility with that rotation, if Gio Gonzalez can pitch well and Roark continues to do what he does, to challenge, I think, the Dodgers for the best record in the National League.
So here's my thin limb. Now that I can get to it.
Very thin.
I think that based on how bad the rest of the National League East is going to be and how good the Nationals have an opportunity to be, I think that the Nationals earn their first 100-plus win season this year.
I don't think that's really that bit of a limb. I think they should have. Last year, we saw a little bit, some games where they kind of got into a skid. Of course, we had Harper out. I mean, I remember us being at dinner and just going, "Oh crap!" You lose him for a good chunk. I think Harper. You look at his WAR. He's good for those 3 games. So no, I don't think that's very far of a limb. I'm actually really okay with your standings. I think that the Marlins obviously are gonna bottom out. I'm with you on the Mets. The caveat here is you have Todd Frazier, didn't have the best year in New York. Adrian Gonzalez comes into New York away from L.A. We'll see what happens health-wise with him. That's the hard part. As Asdrubal Cabrera, of course, they re-signed Jose Reyes, though he's not expected to be the starting shortstop. You got Jay Bruce. Again, Bruce seemed happy going back to New York. He wanted to be there. To me, speaks a little bit to the culture of that team. Cespedes, I think we both agree he's still overpaid. He has moments where he can produce. If he can produce consistently, make the All-Star team, and you have Juan Lagares in center, they have the pieces. They have the rotation. Juris Familia, still one of the best closers in the game. He is. So they have pieces there. It's just a matter of can everything finally gel for them. Again, under Mickey Callaway's direction now, Terry, why did I just blank on his name? Terry Collins is now an advisor with the front office. He's not going to have control over them the same way. As far as the Marlins, it was that, who the heck knows with them. Here's one thing I will say off the Marlins here. This is kind of different. Is we saw Jarlin Garcia last year for them, who's a left-hander, had 68 appearances as a relief pitcher, and that's a rookie. Led the team. Don Mattingly has said, quote, Jarlin will be a starter this year. It's probably the best for his development, end quote. So it looks like that he will be a starting pitcher. And the last one after arbitration, Dan Straley, and I think you sent me this. I didn't have a chance to fully look at it, But Dan Strelly came out, and one of the few guys left on this team. Obviously, Real Muto is still there. He wants to be traded. Martin Prado has said that he doesn't like the idea of players asking for trades. I'm sure deep down he doesn't want to be part this late in his career of a rebuild. And the Marlins have made no bones about it. They want to get rid of his salary. And he is a very competent and solid hot corner player for a team that will need one. But Straley said in regards to, certain players like Yelich and Stanton going, and he's, quote, glad, end quote, that certain players didn't stay. He said, quote, I guess kind of agree with what happened. All the moves they've made, I really feel the pieces they've brought in, this might flip around a little quicker, end quote. So Dan Straley, at least if he goes to arbitration with you, I believe the Marlins actually won the arbitration case, and he's still that positive. That's a good piece to at least have in your clubhouse, for guys that are going to go through the arduous, frustrating, the frustrating feel, of a lot of years in the next 3 or 4 years of really, really bad seasons. And as far as the Braves go, we just don't know what we have yet. Mike Foltynewicz, their number 2 starter, he lost in arbitration by $100,000. The Braves won. He felt unhappy with the way the Braves handled some things, so a little bit of sour grapes there, but he said, I'm ready to go to work and do what I can do to help the team get better. Tyler Flowers, still one of the better catchers in the game. Freddie Freeman, you kind of feel like, we're just wasting his prime because he's on a team that's never going to go anywhere. You have old Nick Markakis in right field. Ender Inciarte should be, a perennial all-star center fielder for the Braves. And then the big question is you have Camargo at third, a young kid. But let's be honest, the question is simple. Who the hell is Dansby Swanson going to be this year? We don't know. He's a conundrum wrapped up in an enigma, or whatever the way the saying goes. So you paid a lot for him. Shelby Miller obviously hasn't done anything with the Diamondbacks, so at least Swanson has given you some, some kind of performance. But I still unfortunately, I think while the Phillies probably go fourth, the Braves are going to be well under 500.
I know that we don't usually do this at the end of the show, but I would just like to let you know that I just now got breaking news that the Minnesota Twins have acquired right-hander Jake Odorizzi from the Rays.
Wow.
That's a big move from a team that has already made some moves there in the Central. Probably raises the Twins stock just a little bit going into spring training here.
And we talked about it last week. That kind of, I think, changes up the way that we had our divisions lined up. We said, it was going to be pretty much a matter of which team made which move to see who goes where. That pretty much sits them there. Jermaine Palacios, one of the players going back to the Rays. Like I said, the Rays are in absolute rebuild, and that's with the new stadium coming up. It's unfortunate, but it pains me to say it, as it is the team I go see most often. It's the right call. It just is, and we'll discuss the AL East next week. I'll tell you again why I think it is the right call. But sorry, guys, at the end of the show, again, by the time it goes up, we know you're all going to hear it, but 10 o'clock Eastern time on the 17th, this is breaking news. So we're getting it first. We'll try and get it out to you. But that's a big thing and something that we will discuss more as we get the finalized parts of this deal in the coming hours and days. We'll bring it up next week more in depth, and of course talk about what this means for the AL East. You know how we ranked the AL East, but what do we think is going to happen as we continue to break down the 5 divisions now left in Major League Baseball. Well, guys, another great show. As always, thank you for sticking with us. If you're playing, we know your season has probably started. Our Little League season starts here in just another week or so. High school has started. I already have taken three shots in game one last night, one in an area I don't care to be hit again, although thankfully no real discomfort. Basically right on the soft part of the inner thigh, just next to the cup. It was one of those just catcher couldn't make contact with a curveball, and I decided to stop it. So
the hard way.
I did. Took one off the force 3. Force 3, fantastic. Worked like a charm. Didn't feel a thing. Just made me kind of laugh. So always just love that mask. It makes me happy to have it again. Good God, Chris, you're giving me even the come here hands more breaking.
I know. This isn't directly breaking. This happened a couple hours ago while we were preparing for the show, but the Giants added a left-hander to their bullpen and Tony Watson on a 2-year contract. Obviously, the left-handed reliever is been the most shaky position in their bullpen at this point, and so they went ahead and solidified that up in San Francisco. That's a Sabian move. So we'll see how that goes, but that's a big signing too.
Well, before we keep on running even longer with this, or we have to re-record the whole damn show because of all this crazy news, that's going to be a great signing. A guy with a sub 2.7 ERA, guys. Promise, we're going to go over all this breaking news much more in depth next week on the show. Be sure to stick with us. A ton of stuff still coming. We know that you are getting ready to play some baseball. We are playing baseball here. A lot of good stuff coming down the pike, and we are really about a week and a half away from opening tap at spring training. So it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody at the Grueling Truth Network. For Chris, I'm Graham. Love you guys sticking around. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next week here on Out of Left Field.